Mrs. Kowalski had been my neighbor for 8 years, and in all that time, I'd never once been inside her house. She was polite when we ran into each other at the mailbox, friendly enough to wave when she saw me in the yard. But there was always a distance there, a wall, like she was keeping something locked away from the world. So when I found her collapsed on her front porch that Tuesday morning in March, barely conscious and struggling to breathe, I didn't know what to expect when the ambulance came. I certainly didn't expect what happened 3 days later. My name is Rachel Martinez. I'm 34 years old, married for 9 years to a man named David, and we have two daughters, Emma, who's 7, and Sophia, who's 5. We live in a quiet suburban neighborhood in Portland, Oregon, the kind of place where people keep their lawns neat and their secrets neater. Mrs. Kowalski was 73 years old. I knew that from the birthday card I'd left in her mailbox last July, when I saw the date on some mail that had been delivered to our house by mistake. She lived alone. No visitors that I ever saw, no family that came by for holidays. Just her and that big house with the perfect rose garden that she tended every morning when the weather was nice. That Tuesday morning, I was taking out the trash before work when I heard a sound, a soft thud like something falling. I looked over and saw Mrs. Kowalski lying on her porch, one hand reaching toward her front door, the other clutched to her chest. I dropped the trash bag and ran. By the time I got to her, she was barely breathing, her face pale and sweaty. I called 911, held her hand, told her help was coming. She tried to speak, but couldn't get the words out. Her eyes were desperate, trying to tell me something important. The ambulance arrived within 10 minutes. They loaded her into a stretcher, asked me questions I couldn't answer because I barely knew her. Did she have any family? Any medical conditions? Any medications? I had no idea. They took her to Portland General Hospital. I followed in my car because it felt wrong to just go back to my normal day after finding someone collapsed on their porch. At the hospital, they told me she'd had a major heart attack. They were doing everything they could, but it didn't look good. I called David to tell him I'd be late for work. He said he'd handle getting the girls to school. I sat in that waiting room for 3 hours before a doctor came out and told me Mrs. Kowalski was stable, but critical. She was asking for me. That surprised me. I'd lived next to this woman for 8 years, and we'd maybe had 5 real conversations, but she was asking for me specifically. The nurse led me to her room. Mrs. Kowalski looked small in that hospital bed, hooked up to machines that beeped and hummed. Her eyes opened when I walked in, and she tried to smile. "Rachel," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "I'm here," I said, pulling a chair close to her bed. "Don't try to talk. Just rest." But she shook her head weakly. "No time. Need to tell you something. Need you to do something for me." "Anything," I said, and I meant it. She reached for the small table beside her bed, where they'd put her personal items, a purse, a phone, some keys. With shaking hands, she pulled out an envelope from the purse. It was thick, cream-colored, sealed with red wax, like something from another era. "In my house," she whispered. "My desk. There's a locked drawer. Key is in my jewelry box. The wooden one on my dresser. Inside the drawer, there are more letters. But this one." She held up the envelope. "This one you need to deliver now, before it's too late." "Okay," I said, taking the envelope from her. "Who do I give it to?" Her eyes locked onto mine. "Your husband, David Martinez." I stared at her. "My husband?" "Mrs. Kowalski, I don't understand. How do you know David?" "Please," she said, her breathing getting harder. "Just give it to him. Tell him it's from Magda. He'll understand. And the others in my desk, you'll know what to do with them when you read them." "Read them?" "But they're not addressed to me." "They are now," she said. "Promise me, Rachel. Promise me you'll deliver this letter and you'll read the others." The machines around her started beeping faster. A nurse rushed in, checked her monitors, adjusted something on the IV. "You need to leave," the nurse said to me. "She needs to rest." I stood up, still holding the envelope. "I promise," I told Mrs. Kowalski. "I'll deliver it." She closed her eyes, and I thought I saw relief on her face. The nurse ushered me out, and I walked back to my car in a daze, turning the envelope over in my hands. It was addressed in elegant handwriting, "David Martinez," to be opened only by him. I sat in my car and stared at that envelope for 10 minutes. Mrs. Kowalski knew my husband's name. Not just knew it, but knew him well enough that she'd written him a letter. A letter that couldn't wait. I thought about all the times I'd seen her looking at our house from her window. All the times she'd been outside when David was mowing the lawn or playing with the girls in the yard. I thought she was just lonely, just watching the neighborhood like old people do. But now I wondered, what did she know about David that I didn't? I drove home with that envelope on the passenger seat, its presence heavy like it weighed 100 pounds instead of an ounce. David was at work, the girls at school. The house was empty and quiet. I held the envelope up to the light, trying to see through it. Nothing. The paper was too thick. I could break the wax seal, read it before giving it to David. Nobody would know, but I'd promised Mrs. Kowalski. And something about the way she'd looked at me, the desperation in her eyes, made me want to keep that promise. I put the envelope on David's desk in his home office and went back to work. I couldn't concentrate. My mind kept going back to Mrs. Kowalski, to her collapsed on the porch, to the envelope with my husband's name on it. At lunch, I called the hospital. They told me Mrs. Kowalski's condition had worsened. She wasn't expected to make it through the night. I asked if I could visit again, but they said only family was allowed now. I thought about the locked drawer in her desk, the other letters she'd mentioned. She'd said I'd know what to do with them after I read them, but that would mean going into her house without permission, going through her private things. Though she had given me permission, hadn't she? She'd told me where the key was, told me to read them. That was permission. I left work early, telling my boss I had a family emergency. Technically true. I drove home and stood on my porch, looking at Mrs. Kowalski's house across the street. Her roses were in full bloom, red and yellow and white. She'd spent decades tending those roses. I walked across the street, up her porch steps to where I'd found her that morning. The door was unlocked. The paramedics must have forgotten to lock it when they left. Inside, Mrs. Kowalski's house was beautiful. Hardwood floors, antique furniture, family photos on every surface. Except I didn't recognize anyone in the photos. There was a young woman who appeared in many of them, always smiling, always beautiful. Dark hair, dark eyes, a laugh that seemed to jump out of the pictures. In her bedroom, I found a jewelry box on the dresser. It was hand-carved wood, intricate designs of flowers and birds. Inside were necklaces, earrings, bracelets, and a small silver key. I took the key and found the desk in her study. It was an old roll-top desk, the kind with dozens of small compartments. I found a locked drawer at the bottom. The key fit perfectly. Inside were letters, dozens of them, all in the same cream-colored envelopes with red wax seals, all addressed to different people. I recognized some of the names, people in our neighborhood, people I saw at the grocery store, at school pickup, at the park. And there, at the top of the stack, was another envelope addressed to David Martinez, a second letter. But Mrs. Kowalski had said to read them. So I picked up the first letter in the stack. It was addressed to someone named Jennifer Shaw. I broke the seal and started reading. My dearest Jennifer, if you're reading this, I'm gone. I've watched you for 3 years now, watched you struggle with what your husband is doing. I know about the other woman. I've seen her come to your house when you're at work. I've seen them together. I'm sorry I never told you when I was alive. I was a coward. But you deserve to know the truth. Her name is Lisa Chen. She works at the bank on Morrison Street. They've been meeting every Thursday for the past year. I'm sorry, I thought you should know. Magda Kowalski. I stared at the letter. Mrs. Kowalski had been watching people, collecting their secrets, writing them down in letters she planned to have delivered after her death. I picked up another letter. This one was addressed to Tom and Sarah Berkeley, a couple who lived 2 blocks away. Dear Tom and Sarah, I know about your son. I know he's been dealing drugs from your garage. I've seen the cars coming and going, always late at night, always quick transactions. I never called the police because I understand why you haven't. He's your child, but he needs help, and he won't get it if you keep enabling him. The truth will come out eventually. Better it comes from someone who cares. Magda. Another letter. Another secret. Mrs. Kowalski had been systematically documenting the hidden lives of everyone in the neighborhood. I picked up the envelope addressed to David, the second one. My hands were shaking as I broke the seal. David, you probably don't remember me, but I remember you. 40 years ago, you were 6 years old. Your mother was my best friend, Catherine. We met in college, stayed close for years. She told me everything, including what your father did to her, including why she left. I was there the night she came to my house with you, both of you bruised and scared. I helped her pack. I drove you both to the bus station. I gave her every dollar I had saved. And then she asked me to keep a secret. She asked me never to tell you what really happened that night. She said you were too young to understand. That one day when you were ready, she'd tell you herself. But she never got the chance. She died 6 months later in that car accident. And I kept her secret all these years. But you're a grown man now. You're a father. And I think you deserve to know the truth about what happened. Your father didn't just hit your mother. He tried to kill her that night. He threw her down the stairs, and she was unconscious for almost a minute. When she came to, she grabbed you and ran. She never pressed charges because she was terrified he'd find you. She changed both your names, moved across the country, started over. She died protecting you from him. And he's still alive, David. Your father is still alive. His name is Robert Schaffer. He lives in Miami now. I hired a private investigator 5 years ago to find him. I wanted to make sure he didn't know where you were. He doesn't. But I thought you should know the truth. Your mother loved you more than anything in this world. She gave up everything to keep you safe, Magda. I read the letter 3 times. David never talked about his mother. I knew she'd died when he was young, knew he'd been raised by his grandmother after that. But he always changed the subject when I asked about his childhood. Now I knew why. I looked at the first envelope Mrs. Kowalski had given me at the hospital. The one she'd said needed to be delivered now, before it was too late. What was in that letter that was so urgent? I knew I shouldn't read it. It was addressed to David, sealed, meant for his eyes only. But Mrs. Kowalski had told me to read the other letters. She'd wanted me to know these secrets. I broke the seal on the first envelope and pulled out the letter. David, I'm dying as I write this. Heart failure, the doctors say. I have maybe a week, maybe less. There's something you need to know, something I should have told you years ago. I knew your mother, Catherine. We were best friends. But there's more. I was there the night everything changed. I was the one who helped her escape. I was the one who gave her the money to start over. And I was the one who promised to watch over you if anything ever happened to her. When she died, I lost track of you. You went to live with your grandmother, moved away, and I couldn't find you. I looked for years. Then 9 years ago, you moved in across the street from me with your new wife. I couldn't believe it. After all that time, you'd found your way back to me. Except you didn't know who I was. You didn't remember me. You were 6 when we last saw each other. Why would you? I should have told you then. I should have introduced myself, explained our connection. But I was selfish. I wanted to watch you from a distance, see the life you'd built, make sure you were safe and happy. And you were. You are. You're a good husband, a good father. Catherine would be so proud. But there's something else. Something I need to tell you before I die. Your father is looking for you. Robert Schaffer hired a private investigator 6 months ago. I don't know how he found out you changed your name, but he knows. He knows you're David Martinez now. He knows you live in Portland. He doesn't know your exact address yet, but he's getting close. I'm telling you this because you need to be prepared. You need to protect your family. Your father is not a good man. He never was. The violence didn't stop with your mother. He went to prison for assault in 1995, got out in 2003, went back in 2007 for domestic violence. He's been out since 2015, and according to my investigator, he's been sober and claims he's changed. But I don't believe it. Abusers don't change. They just get better at hiding it. I'm sorry I waited so long to tell you. I'm sorry I wasn't brave enough to do it in person. But please, David, please protect yourself. Protect Rachel and your beautiful girls. Don't let him find you, and if he does, don't believe anything he says. Your mother died protecting you from him. Don't let her sacrifice be in vain. There's one more thing. In my house, in my desk, there's a locked drawer. Rachel knows where the key is. Inside, you'll find all the documentation about your father. Police reports, investigator files, everything. You'll also find letters from your mother. She wrote you one letter every month after she left your father, telling you everything she wanted you to know when you were old enough. She kept them in a box that I found in her belongings after she died. I've kept them safe all these years, waiting for the right time to give them to you. The time's now. Read them. Know how much she loved you. And please be safe. With love, Magda Kowalski. Your mother's friend and yours, even if you didn't know it. I sat on the floor of Mrs. Kowalski's study and cried. For David's mother. For the little boy who'd lost her. For the woman who'd watched over him from across the street for 9 years without ever saying a word. And then I thought about what the letter said. David's father was looking for him. Was getting close to finding him. Our family was in danger. I looked at my watch. It was 3:30. The girls would be getting out of school soon. David would be home from work by 6. I needed to get these letters home. Needed to figure out how to tell him everything. I gathered all the letters addressed to David and the documentation Mrs. Kowalski had mentioned. There were police reports from 1984, the year Catherine left. Reports about Robert Schaffer beating his wife, threatening her, stalking her. There were restraining orders that were never enforced. There were hospital records showing Catherine's injuries. And there were the letters, a box of them, each one marked with a date. One for every month from September 1984 until February 1985, when Catherine died. 5 months of letters she'd written to her son, explaining why she left, where they were going, how much she loved him. I carried everything across the street to my house and put it all in David's office, next to the first letter I'd placed there that morning. Then I went to pick up the girls from school. Emma and Sophia were their usual chatty selves, talking about their day, arguing about whose turn it was to pick the after-school snack. I went through the motions of being mom, making them graham crackers and apple slices, helping with homework, but my mind was somewhere else. At 5:45, I got a call from the hospital. Mrs. Kowalski had passed away at 5:23 p.m. They were sorry for my loss, they said. Did I know if she had any family they should contact? I told them I'd look into it, but I knew the answer. No family. No one except a neighborhood full of people whose secrets she'd kept locked in her desk. David came home at 6:15. He kissed me hello, asked about my day. I told him we needed to talk, that something had happened with Mrs. Kowalski, that there were letters for him. We put the girls in front of the TV with their dinner and went into his office. I handed him the first letter, the one Mrs. Kowalski had given me at the hospital. What is this? He asked. And Mrs. Kowalski died today, I said, but before she died, she gave me this letter. It's for you. I'm sorry, David. I read it. She told me to read them. He looked at the envelope, at his name written in elegant script, and something in his face changed, like he knew before he opened it that his life was about to shift. He broke the seal and read. I watched his face as he went through the letter, watched the color drain from his cheeks, watched his hands start to shake. When he finished, he just sat there, staring at the paper. David? I said softly. Are you okay? He looked up at me, and there were tears in his eyes. Magda. Her name was Magda. I remember her. She had a house with a big garden. She gave me cookies. She let me play with her cat. You remember her? Barely. I was so young. But I remember that night, my mom was crying. There was blood on her face. Magda wrapped me in a blanket and put me in her car. I fell asleep in the back seat. When I woke up, we were at a bus station, and my mom was holding me so tight I could barely breathe. He put the letter down and covered his face with his hands. I never knew. My mom told me my dad died in an accident. She said we were starting over somewhere new. I never questioned it, and then she died. And I went to live with my grandmother, and everyone just stopped talking about the past. There's more, I said, and handed him the second letter, the box of his mother's letters, the police reports, all of it. He went through everything slowly, read each of his mother's letters with tears streaming down his face. Letters where she told him how much she loved him, how sorry she was for uprooting his life, how she hoped one day he'd understand why she had to run. In one letter, she wrote about the day he was born, how she'd held him and knew immediately that she would do anything to protect him. In another, she wrote about his first day of kindergarten, how proud she'd been. In another, she wrote about her fears that his father would find them, that she'd spend the rest of her life looking over her shoulder. The last letter was dated February 10th, 1985, 5 days before she died. My sweet David, you're sleeping right now in the next room. I just checked on you, and you look so peaceful. I hope you're having good dreams. Tomorrow, you'll turn 7 years old. 7 years since you came into my life and changed everything. I wanted to write you this letter to tell you that whatever happens, wherever life takes you, know that you were loved. Know that every decision I made was to keep you safe. If something happens to me, if I'm not there to protect you anymore, please know that I tried. I tried so hard to give you a better life. And if your father ever finds you, if he ever tries to tell you that I took you away from him for no reason, don't believe him. I left because staying would have killed both of us. I left because I loved you too much to let you grow up watching your father hurt your mother. I left because you deserved better. You deserved a childhood without fear, without violence, without the sound of breaking glass and raised voices. I hope I gave you that. Even if it was only for these 5 months, I hope I gave you some happiness. Be good, my sweet boy. Be kind. Be brave. And if you can, forgive me for the secrets I kept. I love you more than words can say. Forever and always, Mom. David folded the letter carefully and put it back in the box. Then he picked up the investigator's report about his father. Robert Schaffer, 67 years old, living in Miami. 2 more arrests since his last prison term, both domestic violence. Both charges dropped when the victims refused to testify. Currently working as a mechanic. Recently hired a private investigator named Thomas Drake to locate his son, David Schaffer, now known as David Martinez. The report included photos. I looked at them over David's shoulder. Robert Schaffer looked old, weathered, mean. There was something cold in his eyes, something that made me understand immediately why Catherine had run. He's looking for me, David said quietly. After all these years, he's still looking for me. Mrs. Kowalski said he's getting close, I said. She said he knows you're in Portland. David stood up and started pacing. We need to do something. We need to protect the girls. If he finds us, if he shows up here, we'll call the police, I said. We'll get a restraining order. We'll do whatever we have to do. A restraining order didn't stop him before, David said, gesturing to the police reports. My mother had a restraining order. He violated it 6 times before we left. Things are different now, I said, but I wasn't sure I believed it. That night, we didn't sleep. We stayed up making plans, talking about options. We could move again, change our names again, but that would mean uprooting the girls, leaving our jobs, starting over. And there was no guarantee Robert wouldn't find us again. We could wait and see if he showed up, be prepared to deal with him if he did. But that felt like waiting for a bomb to go off. Or we could be proactive. We could find him first, confront him, try to end this once and for all. At 2 a.m., David made a decision. I need to go see him. I need to face him. I'm not going to spend the rest of my life running from a man I barely remember. David, that's crazy. You can't just go to Miami and confront a violent man who's been looking for you for decades. What's the alternative? We wait for him to show up at our house. We let him come to us where our daughters are. He had a point. Then we go together. I said, you're not doing this alone. The next morning, we made arrangements. David called in sick to work. I called my sister and asked if she could watch the girls for a few days. We told them we had to make an unexpected trip for work, nothing to worry about, and we booked flights to Miami for that afternoon. On the plane, David kept reading his mother's letters, like he was trying to memorize every word. She was so scared, he said. Every letter you can feel how terrified she was that he'd find us. And he did. He found me. 38 years later, but he found me. We landed in Miami at 11 p.m., rented a car, found a hotel, lay awake most of the night planning what we'd say, how we'd approach this man who'd shaped so much of David's life without David even knowing it. The next morning, we drove to the address in the investigator's report. It was a rundown apartment complex in a part of Miami that looked like it had seen better days. Robert Schaffer lived in Unit 2B. We sat in the car for 20 minutes, just looking at that door. Finally, David said, I have to do this. We walked up to the door together. David knocked. The sound echoed in the concrete hallway. The door opened, and there he was, Robert Schaffer, older than his photo, thinner, with sunken eyes and hands that shook slightly. He looked at David, and something flickered across his face. Recognition. David, he said, is that you? How did you know? David asked. I'd know you anywhere. You look just like your mother. His voice broke on the word mother. Can we come in? David asked. Robert stepped aside, and we entered a small apartment that smelled like cigarettes and old coffee. The furniture was cheap, the walls bare except for one photo, a wedding photo of a young Robert and Catherine, both smiling, both looking like they had their whole lives ahead of them. I've been looking for you, Robert said, for so long. I hired investigators, checked every lead. When I found out you changed your name, I knew why. Your mother poisoned you against me. She saved me from you, David said, his voice hard. I know what you did to her. I've seen the police reports, the hospital records. She didn't poison me against you. She protected me from a monster. Robert's face twisted. You don't understand. I was sick back then. I had problems. I drank too much. I couldn't control my temper. But I got help. I changed. I've been sober for 10 years now. I go to therapy. I'm not that person anymore. Good for you, David said, but that doesn't change what you did. You terrorized my mother. You put her in the hospital. You made her so scared that she ran away in the middle of the night with a 6-year-old and never looked back. I know, Robert said, and to my surprise, there were tears on his face. I know what I did. I've spent every day for the past 38 years living with it. Do you know what it's like to know you destroyed the only good things in your life? To know your wife is dead and your son is gone because you were a drunk, violent piece of garbage? He sat down heavily on his couch, his face in his hands. I didn't come here to ask for your forgiveness. I know I don't deserve it. I just wanted to see you one more time, to know you were okay, to know I didn't destroy you the way I destroyed everything else. David stood there, looking at this broken old man who was his father, and I could see the war happening inside him. Part of him wanted to rage, to make Robert feel the pain his mother had felt. Part of him wanted answers, and part of him, the part that was a father himself, understood the weight of failing your child. Why now? David asked. Why start looking for me now? I'm dying, Robert said simply. Liver cancer. They give me maybe 6 months. I wanted to see my son one more time before I died, that's all. Just see you know you were okay and then leave you in peace. David sat down across from him. I'm okay. I have a good life, a wife, 2 daughters, a job I like, I'm happy, and you don't get to be part of that. I know, Robert said, but, David continued, and I could hear the struggle in his voice. I need you to understand something. My mother died thinking you were going to find us. She died scared. She spent the last 5 months of her life running from you, looking over her shoulder, afraid every time someone knocked on the door. She never got to relax. She never got to feel safe. And that's on you. I know, Robert said again, and I need you to stop looking for me. You found me. You got to see I'm okay. But now you need to let me go. Delete my information from your files. Tell your investigator to stop. I don't want to spend the rest of my life wondering if you're going to show up on my doorstep. Okay, Robert said. I promise I'll stop. And one more thing, David said, pulling out his phone. He showed Robert a photo of Emma and Sophia. These are my daughters. Your granddaughters. You'll never meet them. You'll never know them. That's what you lost when you raised your hand to my mother. You lost a chance to be in their lives. Robert looked at the photo for a long time. They're beautiful, he whispered. They look like your mother. We left after that. There was nothing more to say. David had gotten what he came for, answers and closure, and Robert had gotten to see his son one last time. On the flight back to Portland, David was quiet, processing everything. When we were about an hour from landing, he said, I thought I'd feel different, angrier or sadder or something, but I just feel tired. That makes sense, I said. You've been carrying this weight your whole life without even knowing it. Mrs. Kowalski gave me such a gift, he said. She watched over me for 9 years. She kept me safe, even when I didn't know I needed protecting. And then she made sure I knew the truth before it was too late. When we got home, David went to Mrs. Kowalski's house one more time. He stood in her rose garden and thanked her out loud, even though she was gone. Then he came home and held Emma and Sophia for a long time. Just held them and told them he loved them. Over the next week, David delivered the other letters Mrs. Kowalski had written. He didn't read them, didn't judge the secrets inside. He just put them in people's mailboxes and let them deal with their own truths. Jennifer Shaw, the woman whose husband was cheating, came to thank him. She said the letter had given her the courage to leave a bad marriage. Tom and Sarah Berkeley, the couple whose son was dealing drugs, got their son into rehab. One by one, the secrets came out, and the neighborhood began to heal from things they hadn't even known were broken. We arranged Mrs. Kowalski's funeral. Not many people came, maybe 20 at most. But David gave the eulogy, and he told everyone there who she really was. Not just a quiet old lady with the rose garden, but Catherine's best friend, the woman who helped them escape, the guardian angel who'd watched over him from across the street. Magda Kowalski saved my life twice, David said. Once when I was 6 years old and she drove my mother and me to safety. And once when I was 44 and she told me the truth I needed to hear. She spent her whole life watching over people, keeping secrets, protecting those who couldn't protect themselves, and she never asked for anything in return. She just loved from a distance and hoped it was enough. After the funeral, we cleaned out her house. We found more letters, more secrets, more evidence of a woman who'd spent decades paying attention to the lives around her. We found photos of our family, taken from her window, photos of the girls playing in the yard, of David mowing the lawn, of me watering flowers. She'd been documenting our lives, making sure we were safe. In her will, which we found in her desk, she left her house to David. She'd changed it just 3 months earlier, the lawyer told us. The previous version had left everything to charity, but she'd updated it to leave the house to David Martinez, son of my dear friend Catherine, who found his way back to me after all these years. We sold the house, used some of the money to set up college funds for Emma and Sophia, donated the rest to a women's shelter in Catherine's name, but we kept the rose garden. We dug up the bushes and transplanted them to our yard, where we could tend them the way Mrs. Kowalski had for so many years. 6 months after Mrs. Kowalski died, we got a letter from an estate lawyer in Miami. Robert Schaffer had passed away. In his will, he'd left everything to David. It wasn't much, maybe $10,000 and some personal belongings. But there was also a letter. David opened it on our porch, with the transplanted roses blooming behind us. David, I kept my promise. I didn't try to find you again. I told the investigator to close the case. I deleted your information from my files. I let you go, the way I should have let you go 38 years ago. Thank you for coming to see me. Thank you for giving me the chance to see the man you became. Your mother would be so proud. I know I have no right to ask this, but when you think of me, if you ever do, try to remember that I wasn't always a monster. There was a time before the drinking, before the violence, when I was just a man who loved his wife and son. That man got lost somewhere, and I never found him again. But he existed once. I swear he did. Take care of your family. Love them better than I loved mine. That's all any of us can do. Try to love better than our parents did. Robert. David folded the letter and put it away with all the others. The letters from his mother, the letters from Mrs. Kowalski, and now this final letter from his father. The complete story of his life, written by the people who'd shaped it. Are you okay? I asked. Yeah, he said. I think I am. It's strange. I spent my whole life not knowing I was carrying this story around. And now that I know it, it's like a weight I didn't know I was carrying just disappeared. Mrs. Kowalski knew, I said. She knew you needed to know the truth to be free of it. That night, after the girls were in bed, David and I sat in the rose garden, surrounded by Mrs. Kowalski's transplanted bushes. The flowers were blooming red and yellow and white, just like they had across the street for all those years. I've been thinking, David said, about all the secrets Mrs. Kowalski kept. About how she watched everyone and wrote down what she saw. It seems almost wrong, doesn't it? Like she was spying on people. I used to think that, I said, but now I think she was just paying attention. Most people go through life not really seeing what's happening around them. She saw everything, and she tried to help in the only way she knew how. By waiting until she was dead to tell the truth. Maybe she thought people needed to be ready to hear it, I said. Maybe she knew that some truths are too hard to hear until you have no choice. David picked one of the white roses, turned it over in his hands. I wonder how many other people she helped that we don't know about. How many other letters there were that we never found. Maybe that's not for us to know, I said. We sat in silence for a while, listening to the sounds of the neighborhood settling in for the night. Dogs barking, a car passing, someone's TV playing too loud. Normal sounds from normal lives, each one hiding its own secrets, its own stories. I need to tell you something, David said suddenly. Something I've been thinking about since we got back from Miami. My heart jumped a little. After everything we'd been through, I wasn't sure I could handle another secret. I want to find the private investigator my father hired, David continued. Thomas Drake. I want to hire him myself. Why? Your father's gone. There's nothing left to investigate. Not about my father, David said. About my mother. Mrs. Kowalski kept letters from her, kept track of her for those 5 months. But there's 6 years between when she died and when I went to live with my grandmother that I know almost nothing about. I want to fill in those gaps. I want to know what her life was like, where we lived, what she did for work. I want to know her story. Okay, I said, then let's find him. Thomas Drake turned out to be semi-retired, living in Seattle, but still taking the occasional case. When David called him and explained what he wanted, there was a long pause on the other end of the line. You're Robert Schaffer's son, Drake said finally. He talked about you all the time. Obsessed over finding you. I know, David said. I met him before he died. But this isn't about him. This is about my mother. Can you help me? I can try, Drake said. What do you want to know? Everything, David said. I want to know everything. It took Drake 3 months to compile the information. When he finally sent us his report, it was over 100 pages long. Photos, interviews with people who'd known Catherine, records from the places she'd worked, the apartments she'd rented, the life she'd built while running from her past. Catherine had been a waitress at a diner in Oakland. She'd worked there for 4 months, and according to the owner, she'd been one of the best employees he'd ever had. Always on time, always smiling, great with customers. She'd never talked about her past, never mentioned a husband or why she was alone with a young son. She'd moved 3 times in 5 months, always paying rent in cash, always using the different names. Martha Collins, Sarah Henderson, Rebecca Foster. She'd been terrified of being found, so terrified that she'd never stayed in one place long enough to feel safe. The night she died, she'd been driving home from her shift at the diner. It was raining, the roads were slick, and according to the police report, she'd swerved to avoid hitting a dog. Her car had gone off the road and hit a tree. She died on impact. David had been with his grandmother that night, staying over so Catherine could work a double shift to save extra money. Drake had found the dog's owner, a woman named Ruth Martinez, who'd been walking her beagle when it slipped its leash and ran into the street. Ruth had seen the accident, had been the one to call 911, had stayed at the scene until the ambulance came. I think about that night every single day, Ruth had told Drake. If I'd held the leash tighter, if I'd been paying it better attention, that poor woman would still be alive. David read that part of the report 3 times. Then he did something I didn't expect. He looked up Ruth Martinez, found out she still lived in Oakland, and called her. They talked for 2 hours. Ruth cried when she realized who he was, apologized over and over for what had happened. David told her it wasn't her fault, that his mother wouldn't want her carrying that guilt for 37 years, that sometimes terrible things just happen and nobody's to blame. At the end of the conversation, Ruth said something that stayed with David. Your mother's last words were about you. I was holding her hand when the paramedics got there, and she was barely conscious, but she kept saying, my son, take care of my son. I told her I would, but she was gone before they could get her to the hospital. But I kept that promise in my own way. Every year on the anniversary of the accident, I donate to children's charities in her name. I've done it for 37 years, and I'll keep doing it as long as I'm alive. David thanked her and hung up. Then he sat at his desk and cried for the mother he barely remembered, the mother who'd spent the last 5 months of her life running from a monster, the mother whose final thoughts were of keeping him safe. Emma found him there an hour later. She was 8 now, old enough to understand that sometimes grown-ups need to cry, old enough to know that hugging someone silently is sometimes the best thing you can do. "Are you sad about Grandma Catherine?" she asked. We'd told the girls about their grandmother, about the whole story in an age-appropriate way. They knew their grandfather had been a bad man, that their grandmother had been brave, that Mrs. Kowalski had been a hero. "Yes, sweetheart," David said. "I'm sad about Grandma Catherine." "I wish I could have met her," Emma said. Me too," David said. "But you know what? You're a lot like her. You're brave and kind, and you always try to protect people who need help. That's what she was like." "Really?" "Really." Emma thought about that for a minute. "Do you think Mrs. Kowalski is with Grandma Catherine now? In heaven or wherever people go?" "I think they probably are," David said. "I think they're probably drinking tea and talking about their roses and watching over us from wherever they are." "That's nice," Emma said. "I like that." She hugged him one more time and went back to playing with her sister. David stayed at his desk, looking at the photos Drake had found. Catherine at the diner in her uniform, smiling at the camera. Catherine and David at a park, him on a swing, her pushing him. Catherine alone, looking out a window, her face tired but determined. In every photo you could see it. The fear she lived with, but also the love that kept her going. She'd sacrifice everything to keep her son safe. Her home, her identity, her sense of security. And in the end, she'd sacrificed her life. But she'd succeeded. She'd kept David safe from his father. She'd given him 6 years of a childhood without violence, without fear. 6 years where he could just be a kid. That had to count for something. A few weeks after the investigator's report came, we received another surprise. A package from Mrs. Kowalski's lawyer. Inside was a letter she'd written to be delivered 6 months after her death, along with a key and an address. "Dear Rachel and David, if you're reading this, then 6 months have passed since I died. I'm sorry for the delay, but I needed to make sure you had time to process everything before I gave you this final piece of the puzzle. The key in this envelope opens a storage unit in Northwest Portland. The address is included. Inside, you'll find boxes, years worth of research, photos, documents, everything I collected about Catherine's life after she left Robert. Everything I couldn't find the courage to give you while I was alive. I hired investigators over the years, trying to track Catherine's movements, understand the life she'd built. I wanted to make sure Robert never found her, but I also wanted to understand what happened to my friend. I wanted to know if she was happy in those final months. I wanted to know if leaving had been worth it. What I found broke my heart and healed it at the same time. Catherine struggled. She worked hard jobs for low pay. She moved constantly, never staying anywhere long enough to make real connections. She was always looking over her shoulder, always afraid. But David, you were her joy. In every interview I conducted, everyone mentioned how much she loved you, how she talked about you constantly, showed photos to her coworkers, bragged about how smart you were. You were the reason she got up every morning, the reason she kept running, the reason she kept fighting. She died protecting you, and she would make the same choice again in a heartbeat. I know that because she told me so in the last letter she ever wrote me. I found it in her apartment after she died, unsent. It's in the storage unit, along with everything else. I'm sorry I kept all of this from you for so long. I told myself I was protecting you, giving you a chance to live without the weight of this history. But I think I was really protecting myself. I couldn't face telling you the truth because that would mean confronting my own guilt. I should have done more to help Catherine. I should have convinced her to press charges, to let me help her disappear completely. I should have checked on her more often, made sure she was okay. Instead, I gave her money and let her run, and then I lost track of her until it was too late. I've carried that guilt for 38 years, watching you from across the street, seeing you build a happy life. That helped ease some of it, but not all of it, never all of it. I hope these boxes help you understand your mother. I hope they show you who she really was, beyond the scared woman running from her past. She was funny, David. She had a great laugh. She loved old movies and chocolate ice cream and flowers, especially roses. She was terrible at keeping plants alive, but she tried anyway. She was my best friend, and I miss her every single day. Take care of each other. Love your daughters the way Catherine loved you. And tend those roses I know you transplanted. They were her favorites. With love, Magda." The next day, David and I drove to the storage unit. It was in a facility near the industrial district, one of those places with rows and rows of identical orange doors. Unit 247 was near the back. The key fit perfectly. Inside were boxes, dozens of them, all neatly labeled with dates and contents. Photos 1984 to 1985, employment records, apartment leases, interview transcripts, news clippings, medical records, letters. We spent the entire day there, going through everything. We found photos of Catherine that David had never seen. Her at work, laughing with coworkers. Her at a playground with David, pushing him on a merry-go-round. Her at a grocery store, carefully counting change to make sure she had enough. We found paycheck stubs showing she'd worked 60-hour weeks, sometimes holding down 2 jobs at once, just to keep them afloat. We found eviction notices from apartments she'd left in the middle of the night when she thought Robert had tracked them down. We found children's drawings David had made in school, stick figures of him and his mom holding hands under a bright sun. And we found a letter, the one Catherine had written to Mrs. Kowalski but never sent. It was dated February 14th, 1985, the day before she died. "Dear Magda, I'm writing this at 2 a.m. because I can't sleep. David is in the next room dreaming about his birthday tomorrow. He'll be 7 years old, and I feel like I've already failed him in so many ways. We're still running, still hiding. He asked me today why we never stay anywhere very long, why he can't have friends like other kids, why we have to keep secrets. I didn't know what to tell him. How do you explain to a 6-year-old that his father is a monster? That we're running for our lives? That everything I'm doing is to keep him safe? I almost called you tonight. I had the phone in my hand, ready to dial your number. I wanted to hear your voice, to ask you if I'm doing the right thing. But I didn't call because I already know what you'd say. You'd tell me I'm doing the best I can. You'd tell me David is safe, and that's what matters. You'd tell me to keep fighting, and you'd be right. But Magda, I'm so tired. I'm tired of being scared. I'm tired of looking over my shoulder. I'm tired of lying to my son about who we are and why we're hiding. Sometimes I think about just stopping, about finding a place and staying there, whatever happens. But then I look at David's face and I know I can't. I have to keep running. I have to keep him safe. He's the only good thing I've ever done in my life. The only thing that matters. I'm saving every penny I can. Maybe in a few years, I'll have enough to leave the country. Canada, maybe, or Mexico. Somewhere Robert can't find us. Somewhere we can stop running and just live. I know I probably won't send this letter. I never do. I write them to feel less alone. Then I hide them in my desk drawer where they can't hurt anyone. But it helps to imagine telling you these things, even if you never read them. You're the best friend I ever had, Magda. The best person I've ever known. I'm sorry I can't call you, can't write to you properly. It's too dangerous. Robert knows we were friends. If he's looking for me, he'll be watching you too. But I think about you all the time. I remember the night you drove us to the bus station, the money you gave me, the way you hugged me and told me everything would be okay. I carry that with me every day. Thank you for saving us. Thank you for being the kind of friend who asks no questions, who just helps. Thank you for giving me the courage to leave. I hope you're happy. I hope you found someone who deserves you. I hope your life is everything you dreamed it would be. I miss you. Love, Catherine." David read the letter twice, then carefully folded it and put it in his pocket. "She was going to call Mrs. Kowalski," he said. "The night before she died, she almost called. If she had, maybe Mrs. Kowalski would have convinced her not to work that double shift. Maybe she'd still be alive. Or maybe she would have died anyway," I said gently. "You can't think like that. You'll drive yourself crazy with the what-ifs." We spent another hour in the storage unit looking through the rest of the boxes. Mrs. Kowalski had been thorough. She'd tracked down every person Catherine had worked with, lived near, interacted with in those 5 months. She'd interviewed them all, asked about Catherine's state of mind, her plans, her fears. One interview stood out. A woman named Patricia Chen, who'd worked with Catherine at the diner. Catherine was the most loving mother I ever saw. Patricia had told Mrs. Kowalski's investigator. She talked about that boy constantly. Everything she did was for him. She worked herself to the bone so he could have a better life. I remember once she came in with bruises on her arms, and when I asked about them, she said she'd fallen, but I knew better. I'd seen those kinds of bruises before. I asked if she needed help, if there was someone I could call. She just smiled and said she was handling it, that she'd gotten away from the person who'd hurt her, that she was never going back. She was one of the strongest women I ever met. Patricia Chen. I looked at David. Do you think she's the same Patricia Chen from the neighborhood? The one who got the letter about her husband cheating? David checked the address in the interview transcript. Different person. This Patricia lived in Oakland. But it made me think about all the letters Mrs. Kowalski had written, all the secrets she'd uncovered and documented. She'd spent years watching people, collecting information, trying to protect them from truths they didn't know they needed. Was it right? Was it wrong? I still didn't know. All I knew was that she'd loved Catherine, and she'd loved David, and she'd spent decades trying to honor the friendship that had been cut short too soon. We loaded all the boxes into our car and drove home. That night, while the girls slept, David and I went through more of the materials. We found birthday cards Catherine had bought for David, but never had the chance to give him. We found a journal she'd kept for 2 months before she died, documenting her daily life, her hopes, her fears. In one entry, dated January 15th, 1985, she wrote, David asked me today if his father loved him. I didn't know how to answer. I wanted to say yes, that of course his father loved him, that all fathers love their sons, but I couldn't lie to him like that. So I told him the truth. I said his father loved him in his own way, but that his love was broken. And broken love sometimes hurts more than hate. I told him he deserved better than broken love. I told him that's why we left. I could see him trying to understand, trying to make sense of it. He's too young to carry this weight. But I don't know how to protect him from it. The truth is the truth, and someday he'll have to face it. I just hope that when he does, he's strong enough to handle it. David put down the journal. I am strong enough, he said quietly, because of her. Because she gave me 6 years without fear. 6 years of just being a kid. That's more than a lot of people get. She'd be proud of you, I said, and the man you became, the father you are. I hope so, he said. I really hope so. Over the next few months, we integrated everything we'd learned into our family story. We told Emma and Sophia about their grandmother, Catherine, showed them photos, told them stories. We explained that sometimes people have to run from bad situations, that being brave doesn't mean not being scared. It means doing what you have to do even when you're terrified. We planted a new rose bush in the garden, a red one, and put a small plaque next to it, in memory of Catherine Foster, who loved her son more than life itself. David started volunteering at a domestic violence shelter, helping other families who were running from abusive situations. He said it was his way of honoring his mother, of making sure other kids didn't have to grow up the way he almost did. On the anniversary of Mrs. Kowalski's death, we held a small ceremony in the rose garden. Just our family, Emma and Sophia, each reading a poem they'd written about Grandma Magda, the neighbor they'd never really known but who'd protected their family for years. She was like a guardian angel, Emma read from her paper, watching over us from her window. She knew things other people didn't know. She kept secrets to keep people safe. And when it was time to tell the truth, she was brave enough to do it even though it was hard. I hope when I grow up I can be brave like her. Sophia's was simpler. Grandma Magda grew roses. Roses that are pretty but also have thorns. Sometimes you need thorns to protect the pretty things. Thank you for protecting us, Grandma Magda. We love you. After the ceremony, David and I stayed in the garden while the girls went inside to play. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Do you think about her often? I asked Mrs. Kowalski. Every day, David said. I think about what my life would have been like if she hadn't told me the truth. If my father had found me without warning. If I'd never known about my mother's sacrifice. Mrs. Kowalski gave me the chance to know my own story. That's a gift not everyone gets. She gave me something too, I said. She showed me that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is tell a truth that hurts. When I opened that letter at the hospital and saw your name, I could have kept it to myself. I could have pretended I never saw it, thrown it away, protected you from the truth. But she taught me that truth matters more than comfort. David took my hand. We're going to be okay, aren't we? Our family, despite everything. We're going to be better than okay, I said. We're going to be honest with each other. We're going to tell our daughters the truth about where they come from, even when it's complicated. We're going to break the cycle of secrets and silence. That's what Mrs. Kowalski and your mother both wanted, for you to be free. And we were, free from secrets, free from fear, free from the past that had haunted David's family for so long. The roses bloomed every summer, red and yellow and white, a living reminder of the women who'd loved David enough to sacrifice everything for him. Mrs. Kowalski, who'd watched over him from across the street. Catherine, who'd given up everything to keep him safe. And me, his wife, who'd delivered that letter and started the process of bringing the truth to light. Sometimes the girls would ask why we had so many roses, more than anyone else on the block. And we'd tell them the story of Mrs. Kowalski and her garden, of Grandma Catherine and her love of flowers, of how sometimes the most beautiful things grow from the hardest circumstances. And every time I looked at those roses, at the thorns protecting the blooms, I thought about what Mrs. Kowalski had written in her final letter, about how Catherine had been her best friend, how she'd missed her every day for 38 years, how she'd spent decades trying to honor that friendship by watching over Catherine's son. Some people would call that obsessive. Some would call it invasive. But I called it love. Complicated, imperfect, sometimes misguided, but genuine love nonetheless. Mrs. Kowalski had asked me to deliver a letter, such a simple request. But that letter had unraveled a lifetime of secrets, revealed a history I never knew existed, and ultimately brought our family closer together by forcing us to face the truth. I was glad I'd opened it, glad I'd kept my promise, glad I'd been brave enough to give David information that would change everything. Because sometimes the most loving thing you can do is hand someone the truth and trust them to survive it. Mrs. Kowalski knew that. Catherine knew that. And now I knew it too. My dying neighbor had asked me to deliver a letter. It was addressed to my husband. And in doing so, she'd given us both the truth we needed to finally be free.